Selection of auditor and advisor. Tax section of CFO100. Selection of the auditor is an annual event in which CFO needs to do decision-making in that process. This selection is an annual routine work, so there are no specific discussion points in general. However, CFO should pay attention to basic checking points for that selection, because the wrong selection makes a lot of unnecessary burdens, and it sometimes breaches legal requirements as well. In this lecture, not only the selection of auditors, but also you can learn the selection of tax advisors. On the first page, you can see the specific way of selection for auditors. There are two perspectives. The first one is a legal limitation, and the second one is tips for the selection. If you look at the left side of the box, you can find the statutory limitations. There are some countries in which you have the regulation to prevent companies to assign the same auditor for long consecutive years. The company needs to change its auditor from the older one in the cycle according to the law. In addition to that, there may be limitations defined in SHA and the internal accounting rules. You need to check the contents. For example, a particular board of directors has the right to select and suggest an auditor for the company. Before having the contract with the auditor, the SHA or Article of Association should be checked. From a different point of view, on the right side of the box, you can see more specific points of view to choose them. The first point is group optimization. The second one is past performance. The third one is negotiation about the fee. The fourth one is the relationship with non-audit work. We will touch them one by one. Group optimization means hiring the same auditor or auditor firm as the parent company. In the consolidation process, the same audit firm makes their process much smoother, and it can reduce unnecessary burdens and communications. And also, past performance should be watched and evaluated. In case of that, the auditor took longer time than expected and they made trouble with your accounting team, you need to consider to change the auditor, even though the changing auditor makes some burden on the company. At the third point, if your auditor did the company's audit many times, they must know much about the company. It is natural to reduce the fee compared with the last year because the efficiency and workload is becoming less than before. You should negotiate with the auditor to reduce the fee, though inflation sometimes makes a natural increase. For the last point, if you hire the firm for the other non-audit work, it is better not to use the same auditor for the audit work due to independence of the auditor. The selection of an appropriate auditor is handled by accounting division, but CFO also simply checks if the division reflects those basic checkpoints listed up in this slide. In the next slide, let's move on to the selection of tax advisors. It is also an important advisor and a third party to which CFO should pay attention. Compared with the auditor, the frequency to have communication with the tax advisor is much more than that in daily activities. You can get their opinion and support when you have uncertainty about the treatment of tax filing, tax inspection, tax litigation, and tax due diligence in your M&A deal. So, the selection of a tax advisor is important because each firm has a specialty and character. What is a good arrangement to hire and utilize a tax advisor? The recommendation is that you keep a relationship with several tax advisors, and in case of that, you have particular purposes, due diligence, TP report, and etc., the appropriate advisor will be chosen. You don't have to fix one advisor for all matters. As a usual process, you submit RFP, receive the proposal, and have the bid process for the selection. You can choose the best advisor for each topic. On the other hand, you may have chances to ask the advisor simple daily questions. For that purpose, it is recommended that you have a contract with an advisor for general queries on time charged basis. When you have unclear points which need consultants from tax advisors, you can casually ask them questions. Flexible arrangement and time charged based regular contract arrangement are a good communication and a good combination to utilize tax advisors. To do this combination smoothly, you should communicate frequently with each advisor, even without particular topics, and you should be friendly with them to have lunch and dinner for entertainment. On the right side of the box, you can find some tips for selection when you hire advisors. When you hire an advisor for a particular matter, a clear explanation of the scope of work and timeline is needed. RFP proposed to an advisor should be the same apple to apple for all advisors. Otherwise, you cannot compare the proposal and the fee from each advisor. As the second point, when you ask for a due diligence report and other tax reports, the timeline is very important. Not waiting for the last moment of the output, you can get the interim report to avoid discrepancy from your expectations. Even after showing RFP, the alignment with person to person is very difficult. As the third point, you should check the actual leader of the project and the person in charge. In the big project, tax firms and advisors show that they have a strong team by inviting senior partners and many advisors. However, it's not always that those people are the main persons to handle the project. You must ask them who will be the main workforce for your project. The fourth point is minor tips, but for international business, you need to choose the proper offices as a contracting party. If you do include not the necessary country's offices, the office is just a contact window and charge it extra money just for communication. You should be careful of the first contact point when approaching. And the last point is that you should compare the fee level with your past experience in your company. Tax advisors sometimes take the chance to charge a lot of fees, especially for due diligence for M&A deal. You compare the market standard fee to avoid being charged a big amount. The most dangerous arrangement is the time charged fee for such a long lead time work like due diligence. Anyway, everything is coming from good communication and a relationship with advisors. So, keeping a relationship with those people is one of the CFO's roles. It is much easier for CFO to meet with senior level people in tax advisor firm and to make a good relationship. The selection and the contract with advisor is much wet thing than you assumed. Personal relationship can work well to get a good quotation and a dedicated service. On the last page of this lecture, you can see three types of advisors. Those are minor kinds of tax advisors, but you need to know the existence of them to enhance your options. The first one is tax lawyer. If you don't have any tax issues and tax court cases, it's very unusual to hire that type of advisor. But in some countries, tax court cases and tax litigation is very common. Even though your company is appropriately filing, you may be involved in the cases. A tax lawyer is a little bit different from a normal tax advisor. In some countries, the tax law limits the involvement of normal tax advisors in tax court cases, and only tax lawyer can appear in that case. And the second one is an advisor as a former tax inspector. A former tax inspector is a person who worked as a tax inspector for the tax office, but now he has retired and he is working as an advisor for a private company. Those people are helpful to give advice, especially regarding the strategy of tax inspection and the tendency of tax inspectors. As a big company, one tax issue causes a significant amount of loss. They need to handle and convince tax inspectors by whatever they can. The former tax inspector can help such a company with their experience. Another good point of hiring a former tax inspector is that they give hidden pressure on the current inspector because the tax inspector doesn't like the people who know their behavior. And also, the former tax inspector has a relationship with their former colleague. They catch the latest information about the regulation change using their network. The third one is a lobbyist. It's very minor for most of all companies, but lobbyists are very common in European countries and the US. Those people give pressure on lawmakers. Regarding the tax regime change, the government and the lawmaker are trying to set up a new tax regulations, which is not always favorable for the companies. The lobbyist is one of the options to give pressure to change the direction of the parliament. It seems to be illegal, but in some European countries and the US, there are offices to do this business aligned with the rule and regulations. As a summary of this lecture, the auditor and advisor are usually helpful third party to give support for your business. But if you wrongly handle them, it causes trouble and unnecessary cost for their companies. That's why CFO needs to consider proper arrangements and tips to utilize them properly and effectively. In this lecture, we didn't touch RFP and review their proposal. Those points will be covered in another lecture.